Hi everyone. In this video, we're going to discuss how to make dot plots using Google Sheets. We're going back to the data for some of our earlier examples. What we have here is a list of raw numeric data that is conveniently enough whole number data, though it doesn't need to be. You can make dot plots for decimal and fractional data. In this class, you're typically going to see us do it for whole number data because it makes it a little easier. And this is an introductory class, but please know dot plots are not limited to whole numbers. I'm going to tackle this by highlighting our raw data. And we know to get charts, we go insert chart, and Google makes its best attempt to guess what we need. We also know we can go to chart editor and chart type and click on that drop down, and you'll see a whole lot of selections. Unfortunately, the closest one that looks like a dot plot is a scatter plot. And when we click scatter plot, we don't get what is expected. And that has to do with how scatter plots are constructed. We're going to see scatter plots later this semester. Scatter plots always plot two variables against each other, an x value versus a y value. Time series graphs are a very specific type of scatter plot. So we've learned Google Sheets does not have a built-in dot plot maker. We can get around this. We're going to create our own homemade dot plot. There are other programs that can create dot plots in the native programming language. GeoGebra is an excellent example. If you create a list of raw data in GeoGebra, it will automatically generate a dot plot. But if you're doing everything else in Google Sheets and you don't want to leave, one way we can do this is by creating a number line using cells and then using entries in cells above the number line to indicate dots for our data. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click here and drag to the right, and I'm going to get rid of all of those gray lines. I want a blank canvas. So I'm going to click borders. I'm going to change that line color to white and then select all borders. So this gives me a blank starting point. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go look at my raw data. And I can see that it extends from 1 to 25, meaning I need my number line to extend from 1 to 25. In order to fit that all on a screen, I need to make these columns skinnier. So I'm going to click on this first column here, and I'm going to drag again to the right. And I'm not going to count. I'm going to make sure I've hopefully selected more than 25. Once I've got those columns highlighted, I'm going to right-click one of them and select Resize Columns. And it's right now set to 100. Let's guess and say 30. That looks pretty small, but it does fit all on our screen. So let's go ahead and use that. The next thing I'm going to do, now that I know that my number line fits on my screen, is I need to figure out how much room I leave vertically for my dot plot. So I'm looking for repeats, and I don't see more repeats than it looks like 3 for 16. So vertically, my dot plot isn't really going to be taller than 3. So I don't need to drop down super far vertically into this sheet. So I'm going to start making my number line here. And I'm going to start writing those numbers starting with 1 all the way up to 25. And I'm working my way across to create a number line. So we've got our number line. We do need an actual vertical line. So I'm going to highlight those cells that I just typed the numbers in. and I'm going back to that borders menu item. I'm going to change the ink color back to black, and then I'm selecting just the top border of that box. And you can see I now have something that looks like a number line. What I'm going to do now is, instead of using a dot, since I don't really have a dot on my keyboard, I'm going to use another symbol. I've seen students use X's. That's a very common one, and that's perfectly fine. The asterisk also works. That's totally fine. You will notice that it tends to show in the upper right-hand corner of the box. We can modify that a little bit by changing that to center. And then, let's see, can we shift it to the bottom? No, I think that's as good as we're going to do. So let's highlight all of these cells and make sure they're set to display in the center, so everything's nice and center. So we have a dot at 1. Our next data point is 4. And then we've got a dot at 6. Whoops. We've got 2 at 7. So I'm going to stack those vertically. Our next data point is 11. We've got 2 at 12. 1 at 13. 1 at 15. 2 at 15. 3 at 16. 1 at 17. 2 at 18. 2 at 19. 1 at 20. 1 at 21. 2 at 22. 1 at 23. 1 at 24, and 2 at 25. So that is a functional histogram in Google Sheets. I am going to zoom in a little bit to make that bigger and recenter it so we can see what that looks like. Again, you can create these natively in programs like GeoGebra, but if you're doing everything else in Google Sheets, sometimes this is the fastest way to get a dot plot done. And you will notice that it looks almost exactly like the dot plots that we did by hand and in GeoGebra. All right, so that is how we construct dot plots in Google Sheets. If you have any other questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.